No, I'm about to be gone. No, forget about the hair. Give me the blush. Oh, we're back here with Cinematic Perspective. This episode is my responsibility to introduce because I shut down the last one, but we're talking all about the digital era of filmmaking. My name's Gil Posnowski, and I'm here with my good friend, Wyatt Weed and Gayle. I'm going to say your last name wrong, so I'm going to let you introduce yourself.
Gallagher.
Why did I not know that? We've known each other way too long for me to mess that up.
What do? Do you put an N in my name? I've had people call me Gallinger.
I think I do.
It's Gallagher unless you're Australian. So
Yeah.
G'day. Gayle Gallagher. How you doing? Sheila? No, people are going to be like, who the hell is that guy? But we're actually going to pick this up and we're going to do our very best to stay on track today.
Oh, yeah. We say that.
Yeah, we do say that. But we're going to be talking all things cinema, especially looking at the post-2000 onward era of digital technology getting in the hands of independent and low-budget filmmaking. Wyatt, you had some ideas from the last episode, and I cut you off, so I'm going to invite you to...
God.
Yes, no pressure, my friend, no pressure.
No, here was sort of my approach when because I was in Los Angeles for 20 years. I finally left Los Angeles in 2006. I came back to St. Louis for a variety of reasons. I was sick of LA. LA was too expensive. There was too much traffic. It was annoying. I just wanted to make freaking films. When I went out there in the 80s, I just wanted to make movies. That's why I went out there. But it's very hard to make movies because there's politics and there's temperaments and there's egos and there's huge amounts of money. And it's very difficult. So with the digital revolution and the digital technology...
You are actually very kind putting it that way. There's a lot of other things you could have said about it. If anyone spent time in Los Angeles, unfortunately, there are a lot of walls you have to get over, even if you've got the money to make your film, to actually get it made. So I actually think that the way you put that is very diplomatic.
It's the Hotel California. It's beautiful. It's wonderful. You like staying there, but then there's all kinds of underlying nightmares, and it's very difficult to leave. So listen to that song. So I come back to St. Louis, and the technology is now very good, and I'm just going to have access to make a film finally and just do all kinds of things in a low-budget arena here in the Midwest. And we immediately figured out that we needed to do kind of local corporate and commercial work to pay the bills. Sure. Meanwhile, we would work on our creative endeavors. But, I was out in Los Angeles for 20 years. I never made a feature film. I did some television work. I did some small things. I come back to St. Louis. Within a year, I'm directing my first feature. That was the difference between working in the system and working in the independent arena.
Well, and you say within a year working on your first feature. Pre-production started on that feature pretty quickly after you came back.
Well, we certainly came back with the idea of making a feature. Bob Clark and you and I kind of joining forces and, having a certain amount of money to spend, courtesy of Bob. And then, we knew we wanted to make a feature and I had ideas and we immediately started batting around the ideas and figuring out which one made practical sense. And then in early 2007, we were actually starting to make...
scripting and pre-pro.
Well, and figuring out locations and figuring out what could be done.
So this is after Guardians?
No.
This was Shadowland.
So Guardians was made in Los Angeles?
Guardian was made in Los Angeles. There's no S on the end.
Guardian. Sorry, I'm sorry.
So we started working on Shadowland. I had been in LA. I'd been in the trenches. I knew how shit was done. I knew what, the Luma crane looked like, what the Techno crane looked like. I knew what the dolly systems could do. I knew what Steadicams could accomplish. I knew what the lighting rigs looked like. I knew how the visual effects were accomplished. I'd been on green screen stages. I'd worked with facilities doing CGI. I was still working with facilities doing physical effects, practical effects, miniatures. So no, I don't have a Fisher 11 dolly. No, I don't have arc lights. No, I don't have a Luma crane, but I know how those things were done. So I would jury rig a large jib arm. I would build my own PVC pipe dolly system and my own various pieces of camera equipment.
We'd go to the local, you rent it and get a crane.
Yeah, or I knew how motion control work was done, and I couldn't do motion control work, but I knew how to shoot using a dolly with a miniature on a green screen, and I knew how to instill the same kind of visual effects motion. So I was basically taking the knowledge that I learned in the classic analog world and brought it back to St. Louis and was able to apply those classic sort of analog techniques with my low-budget digital studio now. Our low-budget digital studio.
What was the phrase that you used? You were like the most well-prepared
Oh my gosh.
first-time director.
Yeah. Starting with a gentleman named Steve Wang. Steve Wang, he was co-director on the Guyver, and then he was the director of Guyver Dark Hero. And then he did a low-budget film called Kung Fu Rascals, and then he did an action film called Drive. I was involved in every one of them.
Right.
Whether I was just a crew person or an actor or an associate producer, second unit director. So I worked on Steve Wang's 4 feature films, to varying degrees of involvement. Some of them, like Kung Fu Rascals and Guyver Dark Hero, I was immersed. Like, Steve did the lion's share of the work, and then I would be here with a couple of other guys doing, if Steve did 95% of it, I was there doing 85% of it with a couple of other guys. I mean, I was deeply, deeply involved in some of these films, which were great, like graduate work. Great graduate work. And then I came out of that, having done some second unit and some television work. And then Ted Smith's Guardian of the Realm, I was his co-screenwriter, an uncredited associate producer, second unit director, visual effects guy, editor. I mean, it's Ted's movie and Ted did the lion's share of the work, and the second guy in line was me.
Yep.
So now I've been incredibly involved in all of these feature films, but I've seen what Steve goes through on his first feature, and I've seen what Steve has to deal with. I see the results. Then I see what Ted has to go through on Guardian of the Realm, and I see the results. So I'm learning from these guys. I'm seeing what's happening to them. So by the time I get to Shadowland, and I'm now in my 40s, and yeah, I felt like I was the most prepared first-time director, because to say I was a first-time director was to say, well, this is your first time up to bat on a feature-length project. But short films, music videos, second unit director on multiple features, director on pilot episodes of television, producer, associate producer. I had such an all-encompassing understanding of the film industry and what it was going to take on a day-to-day basis. But the only thing I wasn't prepared for, and you're never prepared for, is the exhaustion. The just sheer amount of exhaustion that goes through the day in and day out process of making a film. You get to the point where you can't drive, you can't function, you can't talk, you just have to pass out for a few hours because it's so much work.
I always thought that it was really great how much experience you brought back to the Midwest from your experiences in LA and all of the stuff you had done there. And God, I learned so much just watching you on set about the different aspects of filmmaking. There were times, Shadowland, for example, that you shot multiple takes of the SWAT team going into the church. And I thought you were filming that just to have options, that you set up the scaffolding, you had the camera up high, SWAT team runs down the sidewalk and goes this way. All right, guys, come on back. Our 6 SWAT guys then run down the sidewalk and go straight. Bring them all back. All right, guys, now go this way. What I didn't know was that you had the vision in your head that this is a huge church. It wouldn't be a 6-guy SWAT team. It would be 18-guy SWAT team. So you then in post were able to layer those 3 shots.
Do split screen. Split screen and put together 3 takes.
So that you've got 18 SWAT members going into this church using the same 6 guys all dressed the same.
We also had a shot of the SWAT guys jumping out of the back of the vehicle. The big SWAT truck pulls up. Which, it's amazing that, in a smaller town, not LA, but in a place like St. Louis, you can see an actual SWAT vehicle going down the highway. And your wife can actually follow the SWAT vehicle. And when it comes to a stop, say, No, I
took a picture and then I took a...
So then she calls the police station and goes, there's this vehicle. It's beautiful. It's a SWAT vehicle. It's really cool. Oh, yeah, that's the Bear. That's the official SWAT vehicle of the St. Louis Police Department. Well, what would be involved in getting the Bear for a film shoot? Well, if we don't have any police emergencies, you just tell us when you need it to show up and it'll show up. Well, the vehicle showed up on an entirely different day than when we were shooting the SWAT scene. So we basically just got shots of the vehicle pulling up, and then we got the door popping open, but then we cut to a shot of the ground, and we had like 18 sets of boots jumping onto the ground as if they were jumping out of the SWAT vehicle.
Yep.
Well, we shot that the day we had the 6 SWAT guys, and we had literally an apple box and a mark on the ground, and the camera was pointed at the mark on the ground, and I swear to God, the 6 guys lined up, they climbed up on the apple box, they jumped down and ran off camera, one after another, and then ran around the camera, lined up again, and we got 18 sets of boots jumping down off the back of the truck in one take. And it just goes by. I mean, I kind of almost wish some people knew the amount of tricks we pulled just to do the most common things. But that's part of the good side of film, is if they don't know the trick, then you did your job.
I've had situations where people have called the police because they don't know we're making a film, or they got scared us at something, and then we'll steal a shot of the police car driving off. Or we'll have the camera as they're talking to us, and I'll quickly steal a shot of, like, the car almost like it's traveling in with the big kind of police logo on it. And and half the times, once the police kind of have a conversation with us, we're like, hey, can you bring the car back? And they're like, oh, we can do it off duty when you need. In fact, I even had a producer once said to me, I'm going to call the cops and call in a complaint, and we can steal some shots. And I said, no, don't do that. That's a little bit taking it a little too far. If someone else is doing that, that's something else.
Hi, I'm Gayle Gallagher with the Cinematic Perspective podcast. I love movies. I love music, I love movies, and I hang out with other nerds who also love movies, as if you're listening to this podcast, I'm sure you do as well. And so many times when my friends and I are hanging out, somebody will quote a movie or a song or just say something funny, and I think, oh my God, that should be on a t-shirt. So I started the Alley Clothing Company so that I could share these fun designs with you. And also, because one of my goals in life is to save the world, and I know that I can't do it on my own, we partner with different organizations who are saving the world. So go to thealleyclothingco.com. That's THE, alleyclothingco.com. Use promo code podcast for 20% off your first purchase.
In Australia, I think you can do that easier than you can here in the United States. Here in the United States, I think calling in pranks to the police department can get you killed.
Yes. Well,
so, and thankfully in Australia, they're a little less gun crazy. So, that probably works better in Australia. Yeah, that's a whole different episode.
Yeah, there is a different episode, and I think I've mentioned it to you on here before, but we had an end for a scene where there was a big shootout, and we had like the version of SWAT team, I think they were called the Star Rapid Response Team, turn up. And, over the fence line, suddenly we see all these guns pointing at us, and we're like, dudes, we're on a film. And the person whose place it was, he was renting, they had called the landlord. So the landlord was with them to get keys into the building. And I just remember, he goes, what the hell are you doing? You go, we're making a film. And he's like, I want you out of here in tomorrow.
Oh no.
The guy lost, he was just like, I can't, I got up at 3 a.m. and the cops turned up. So you gotta be able to inform people of what's going on. But the question I've got for you, Wyatt, to bring it back to the subject we're talking about, is, could you have done Shadowland without digital technology?
And make it as effective and complete a film? No. I could have... you're talking like digital technology as in even down to the camera and the digital video? I'm
talking about using cameras, being able to then take multiple shots and composite what you needed. Could you have done that on an independent level?
I think if I... Not below a certain dollar amount, no. I think if a low-budget company in Los Angeles had given me, I don't know, $250,000, and I had a crack film team, like, under very, very tight circumstances. Like,
even $250,000 in LA wouldn't have gotten you the locations and stuff that we got.
Here's the problem. Here's the problem with LA. And here's the problem with a lot of filmmaking.
You pay for everything.
Well, and there's a mentality. I would work on these low-budget films in Los Angeles back in the day, these $200,000 quickies, and it was like there was a set template. We have $200,000. We have X amount of 35mm film. We're going to allot 10 days to shoot this, and there are certain things we're going to do, and we're going to get a name actor and pay them X amount so that we have a name to promote this thing. It was a formula. As much as sitcoms are a formula, TV police drama procedurals is a formula, as much as romantic comedies are a formula. Low-budget films in some circles were a formula. Steve Wang would step outside that and go, well, I only have $250,000, but I'm going to have a core team of people. I'm going to make deals with them. They're willing to work overtime. They're willing to work off hours. Everybody's able to sort of shoot outside the normal parameters, and we're able to take things and push them farther, and we don't have to follow a rule book. And so we could get more mileage out of it. If I could have made Shadowland in Los Angeles in an analog fashion, if someone had been willing to just give me a chunk of money and then leave me alone. If you've got a studio that says, here's a chunk of money, the delivery date is this, you come back and give me that on the delivery date. Guyver Dark Hero, very much. Here's a chunk of money, you give me a finished film on a set date. They didn't care how we did it. They didn't care what cat we skinned in order to pull it off. They just wanted the thing done. But if somebody had said, okay, here's $250,000, but I want it shot in 10 days, and you have to have this person in it, and you have to pay everybody X amount of rates, and blah, 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 blah. Well, no. Under those parameters, there's no way I could have done it. And even if someone had said, I don't care how you make it, just deliver it to me on this date, there's still certain things I couldn't have had. I mean, in Shadowland,
the sheer locations that we were able to get because we were in St. Louis, and
you can see the producer. The producer's like, the sheer locations. It's not just that's a producer's mindset, and I agree. Los Angeles is terrible. If you go and ask someone, can I shoot a couple of shots in your house? They go, fantastic. Yeah, no problems. It's going to cost you this much, because the people in LA have learned that the industry will definitely charge. You can make money out of it.
We're here in St. Louis. Yeah. One of the stories I love is that we called up. Wyatt and I were walking in this really cute part of town, kind of hip part of town, and we walked by this little boutique, and we're peeking in the windows, and this is in the evening, they're closed, and we're like, oh my God, that'd be perfect for the clothing store scene. And so the next day I called them up, and the woman's like, wait a minute, let me get this straight. You want to shoot a movie in my shop? And we're like, well, yeah. And she's like, how can I say no to that? They're excited about films being made.
And I do get the point. I do understand that, okay, and again, I always go back to something like the Avengers, but the Avengers Endgame had like a $357 million budget, and I think I plucked that figure off of Wikipedia. It had an outlandishly huge budget. Well, if it had a $350 million budget and it was going to gross $2.5 billion worldwide, I don't blame someone saying, oh, you're Avengers and you want to shoot in my house? Yeah, that'll be X amount of dollars per day. Because somebody somewhere is retiring on that film. Somebody somewhere is buying a house off of that film. Somebody somewhere is making bank off that film and is trying to figure out ways to spend the money. In St. Louis on an indie film, it's a little bit different. So when you come at me and go, oh, you're making a film here in St. Louis? Well, $10,000 a day for my location. I don't have $10,000. Los Angeles, though, the amount of crews making stuff in that film, the amount of people who are profiting hugely in whatever way they're distributing the material, well, yeah, spread the money around. Don't make a $100 million film and you're getting $1 million salary and then tell me you can't afford to pay me for my location. Bullshit. Go someplace else. So I get that there's a difference between the two things.
There's another factor that goes into that as well, which is that if you are kind enough to lend someone your home or your property to make a film, be prepared that the crew is going to dismantle your room, is going to make a mess, is going to move everything around and leave it that way when they're finished for their next bump out.
Well, unfortunately, you're right. I mean, that shouldn't be the case, and we try not to have that be the case. But more often, that is the case.
But we have had people who said, oh, yeah, I understand the film industry, and sure, come to my house, and you can film here. And then they sort of flipped out when people started moving things around, and it's like, wait, I thought you said you understood what was going on.
Right.
The flip side of that, though, too, is that we've had restaurants say, hey, yes, you can come in, no problem, you can use our location. And we've said, great, we would like to feed the crew from your location, from your restaurant. So even though they technically closed the restaurant,
absolutely,
they fed actually probably more people.
And we will pay you. We will pay
Yeah,
you. It's
absolutely.
like, hey, how much do you make for your lunch hour usually? How much do you make on your lunch rush usually? Oh, I don't know. I make a lot of. I make like $150 on my lunch rush. Oh, really? Okay. Well, I'll tell you what. We have 20 people on the crew. We'll guarantee you 150 for lunch, probably more, and we'll buy drinks and snacks all the rest of the day if you'll close down your cafe for us. Really? Excellent. Yeah, it's
because we were
funny.
going to have to pay somebody to feed the cast and crew.
Absolutely.
So, yeah.
And that's great. I do have a question about Dark Hero Guyver 2.
Yeah.
Because I remember watching it well before I knew you both of you. I remember hiring it from the video store on VHS. There's one shot where the Guyver jumps from a hilltop.
Yeah.
And he transforms as he comes down. And that's obviously a digital shot. I remember actually clipping that.
Well, it's a combination.
So it definitely used some sort of digital animation, if I remember correctly. Because again, that shot wouldn't have been able to do practically for the budget. There's no way.
Right.
Or maybe it was composited digitally.
Yes.
But there was definitely digital artifact, because I remember I recorded that clip onto a tape, and I remember going through and literally trying to work out, like reverse engineer, if I was going to do something like this, how would I do it?
What's fascinating about that shot is here's where the analog world is starting to fade and the digital world is starting to present itself. Because on Guyver Dark Hero, we shot, I believe, Super 16, and then we would transfer all the dailies, and then we would edit digitally. Eventually, they went back and conformed the negative to our digital edit. And we were editing with Media 100. So it was kind of an early sort of digital analog crossover.
The old Media 100s. Boy, I haven't thought of that for a while.
Yeah, so
That was my first edit system.
So because we were transferring everything digitally, we had to take digital files and scan them back out to film, and the film, those digital effect shots on film had to be cut back into the negative to make the final prints and the final masters. But that was a nice combination of trickery and practical and digital. So yes, you were right. There was digital compositing. So we had plate shots of like the cliff. And for everybody who either doesn't know what Gil's talking about or isn't quite exactly sure, in Guyver Dark Hero, there's a point in the film, probably at about, the 1 hour mark, where Corey has been captured by zoonoids and she is in distress.
Who's Zoe and what's a zoonoid?
You're making up words.
Corey, the character of Corey, the girl in the film, the love interest. Corey has been captured.
We'll show the clip. The clip.
Anyway, Corey's been captured by the zoonoids. She's down below. She's like way down in a gorge. Sean, who is the Guyver, can hear her screaming. He calls to her. He hears her answer back like 1,000 feet below down in the gorge. He knows she's in danger. So he just goes for it and he takes a running start and he dives off of a cliff like a cliff diver and then transforms into the Guyver in midair. Bam! Lands and hits the ground. Let's reverse engineer the shot because it ends with, I think, what was the beginning, which was Steve... Because this is such a mix of old world analog trickery and digital, because it ends with kind of a whip pan to the ground and the Guyver's feet already there. And then he zips off out of frame, leaving, I think, smoking footprints. And then you whip pan to catch up with him and he's 150 feet away racing off. Well, there's 2 shots right there. There's like one shot of an actual Guyver costumed guy with like A component on his feet and the ground with B component smoke elements. So the A-B smoke, you put them together, they react. So he's got A on his feet, there's B on the ground, and it's a shot. And the puppet, the guy in the costume, jumps in, his feet smoke, he races off camera. As they whip pan, that's a second shot, and they cut on the whip pan to the actor, 100 feet away, terrassing down the hillside. So you've
done 2 whip pans.
So we've done whip pans and cut them together, which is like filmmaking 101, go back 100 years kind of trickery. That's easy. Then we had the plate shot of the cliff and tilting down the cliff, which we were then able to blend the crash to his feet landing and the tilt down the cliff. We were able to blend those together. We had actor David Hayter on a green screen at Ted Ray's studio, I believe. And he's just suspended, on the green screen, floating through the air. And we were able to get a plate of him, which we could then move through the frame digitally. And then I believe they took the old Guyver puppet mold from the first film and did individual resin castings of all the different little plates that were the Guyver costume. And this part, I don't know if Ted Ray animated those pieces going onto him and then composited those on, or had digital photos of those which then went on to him. But basically, you're talking about a lot of live action stuff and trickery and miniatures and live action plates, but combined partially through editing and partially through digital compositing in the early days.
Yes, very early days.
Scan in the film elements, treat them all digitally, scan them back out to film. And that was expensive for us. We probably did a half a dozen digital shots in the film, but they all had to be scanned back out.
So let me ask this question, because that's the moment that I remember the most out of Dark Hero. I don't remember the characters' names, I'm sorry. But obviously you do, because you worked on it, you lived the project. Now, would it have been cheaper or just as costly to have done it photochemically?
I think the issue with photochemical, as we all know, is you're at the mercy of... See, this was already at a point, and this is we shot in 1993, we finished it in 1994. We're already at a point where we realize what we see on the monitor via digital manipulation is what we get. Optically, we were still at the mercy of the optical house. We were still at the mercy of what might happen with the compositing. We wouldn't know until we got it on the far end. And I think probably on the level we were working at, you know what? If we nailed it optically on the first pass, it might have been cost effective. The odds of us nailing it optically on the first pass, and then trying to do the animation and the moves and stuff on like an Oxbury animation stand and trying to do rotoscoping and all of that. No, I think digital was the way to go. Digital was the way to go. And I think we more or less, Ted Ray or whoever was doing the digital manipulation could work that shot and tweak that shot again because it was an indie situation. He probably put in 5 times the amount of energy and labor on that shot. Then if it was a union studio shoot, this guy would be like, well, you're going to have to pay me a bunch of money because this is going to take 150 hours to do this. Ted Ray probably flat bid the shot and then did it until it was right. And that's sort of that dividing line between an indie film, which is easy to abuse, and a studio union film, which says, oh, you want that? You can have that, but it's time and money. If you have an infinite resource, I can give you whatever you ask for. For us, it was, I really want the world, but I only have $5. And then that person has to decide, okay, am I going to give you the world and work extra hard for you out of pride and out of accomplishment? So, yeah, I think the only way for us to accomplish that, someone like Ray Harryhausen could have done it in the 1960s. And he could have done it using
optically?
Stop motion animation and rear screen projection and...
Because he had all the experience doing that?
Yeah, and he had techniques. What you saw in Guyver Dark Hero was a mix of techniques, whereas prior to Guyver Dark Hero, it would have had to have been one thing or the other. And then after Guyver Dark Hero, it had to all be digital because nobody knows better. What you saw in Guyver was a collision between analog and digital, which I think it's still, you remember that shot, you've captured that shot, you copied that shot so that you could study it. That says a lot about it.
Absolutely.
In a Guyver film today, all that stuff would be digital. And this is a really good point for me to talk about. The concept of, back in the analog day, you were talking about The Empire Strikes Back. My God, how did they do that Walker battle? Because you genuinely didn't know. You were looking at all these different things. And you knew there was stop motion, and you knew there was blue screen, and you knew there were models, but what came together to make all that happen, you just didn't, honest to God, know what you were looking at. Nowadays, unfortunately, the answer to everything most of the time is digital.
Well, we even
So
had
there's
people,
no mystery. There's no mystery.
people with Shadowland saying how great they thought that your CGI was in Shadowland, and there wasn't any.
There was digital compositing, but there was no CGI.
And because the audience, even at that point, really had gotten so used to everything being computer generated, they just assumed that what was miniatures and practical effects were CGI.
Right. And so this goes back to the issue then with digital of with CGI, the sky's the limit. Anything you can think of is doable. And you have to ask the question, is that a good thing? You know, I think for some filmmakers and for some films, I think having access to digital, let's face it, Jurassic Park, pretty damn stunning. And they were going to do that film practically. They were going to use stop motion. They were going to use all puppets. Jaws managed to pull it off. Jaws did it effectively. And then at a certain point, they came to Steven Spielberg and said, listen, we think we can do this digital dinosaurs thing. And they showed him tests. But he didn't then say, oh, well, let's do 500 visual effects shots. There's like 50 digital dinosaur shots in Jurassic Park.
So when they were in pre-production on that, they were talking about practical?
Well, and the crazy thing is so much of the film still is.
Yeah, I mean, you've got them hugging a dinosaur that's dying.
Well, and even like the big T-Rex head crashing through the top of the car and chewing at the Mercedes vehicle, chewing at the kids. The foot smashing down into the foreground and squishing the mud was a big... And so much of... There's just a lot of shots throughout the film that are far more practical. They could have finished the film without the digital. They were prepared to finish the film. But there was a certain tipping point where they said... We think we can do this. And I think they went, ooh, okay, that looks good. Let's cut that in. Do you think you can do this, this, and this? Yeah, I think we can. I'm sure if you talk to those guys, they would say, you know what? We had ideas to do these other things. We couldn't quite do it, so we didn't. But yeah, it started off as a practical film, and it could have been finished as such. And there are long extended... Like, you think about the sequence with the two velociraptors...
In the kitchen?
Coming into the kitchen and chasing after the kids. There are brilliant shots in there where it's digital here, it goes out of view, and then you go to the kids, boom, and a practical head pops through. Great combinations of stuff. I think they still could have done the scene, you wouldn't have had a velociraptor jump up on the metal counter with his feet splaying because they were slipping on the metal and walking around. You would have seen upper torsos bopping around behind metal things.
This is a really, really interesting point you're making because there's two things that come to mind. One is we talked about the Phantom Menace before, and there's footage of George Lucas looking at scenes that are completely CGI where he's told his crew, go back and move these droids over here from the left to the right. And when you see the film, it makes absolutely no difference whatsoever, but it did give him that creative ability where we're talking here in Jurassic Park, being able to add something into the scene that's actually creating a much more tense moment and also showing the threat. So that's, what I love about Jurassic Park is the blending of, in this moment, it's stronger that we go digital. And in this moment, let's go practical because we can actually capture it and manipulate it the way we want to. And if doing it in camera is always going to be a faster and cheaper process. The other thing that's really interesting is also going backwards and looking at when you didn't have digital effects and having to create a digital presence on screen. I was just thinking when you were talking about the wireframe representation of Manhattan in Escape from New York.
Oh, sure, yeah.
Which, it was just a very, very simple model with like 3M tape on it, shot through a filter. And, you've now got this incredible representation of a city because the technology wasn't there yet. You could still have probably pulled off something better than the imagery in Star Wars when they're showing the Death Star plans. But even that was, having a university major put all that information in and work on it for like 6 months to get those shots out. The ability to be able to pick and choose, the strength that you have, whether it's a physical effect or whether it's a digital effect, is one of the things that, again, I think is lost a little bit on some of the newer projects where it's like, if we're doing effects, it has to be all digital. It can't be a painting on glass through a camera. Again, the beauty of Jurassic Park was their development of these stop motion puppets that would capture all the points so that you could have Phil Tippett and his team do the stop motion in a traditional way, but then get that result out in a digital. Hey there, film lovers. I hope you're really enjoying this episode of Cinematic Perspective, but I wanted to take a moment out and share with you a brand new project I'm super excited about. It's called Spectacular Distraction, where I uncover hidden gems and forgotten classics from the 70s, 80s, and 90s. The movies and shows that shaped pop culture, but somehow slipped through the cracks. Remember those films that only aired once or twice, disappeared completely, but got stuck in your head? We'll find them, break them down. The rip-offs, the inspirations, and we'll go through and find out all the different pieces that are missing from cinema today. So if you're as obsessed with cinema and pop culture as I am, come on a nostalgic journey with me. Search for Spectacular Distraction on YouTube, hit subscribe, and never miss out on a hidden gem, deep dives, or iconic moments. Because everything else is just spectacular distraction.
Also with that scene in the kitchen in particular in Jurassic Park, although your dinosaur that jumps up on that table is digital, there had to be a gag somehow where they were scattering pots and pans.
Yeah, good
whether
point.
it's strings or whatever.
Yeah.
Or the tabletop indenting a little bit,
Right.
and
Right.
so the practicality of those kind of effects.
And again, I cared about the characters. I didn't want the kids to get, well, maybe I wanted the kids to get eaten, but that's a whole different story. No, but I cared about the characters. I wanted them to survive. I was tense, and it wasn't how much shit can we throw at you in the course of 3 minutes. It was how tense can we make this. That's Steven Spielberg. We're talking about a master filmmaker.
That's Jaws.
That's Steven Spielberg. But this brings up a really good point. Anyone who's younger, who's listening to us right now, who's like, oh, you old people, yeah, whatever, boomer.
Speak about yourself, man. I'm not old.
I know. I've had people tell me, you're not a boomer, and I'm like, yes, I am. I proclaim boomer. I don't proclaim anything else. I embrace boomer with pride. With the digital people today, the younger digital people, I have yet to see the digital technique, the digital discipline emerge. I think probably on a level like, say, high-end universities that are teaching digital cinematography, you're probably getting a high degree of technique being taught. You're getting a high degree of technical proficiency being taught, which probably still includes certain old school techniques like, how to push a dolly, how to stabilize a camera, how to rack focus, how to follow focus, how to do these kinds of things. They're probably mixing some of the old with the new. But what I haven't seen is that in the analog world, because we were up against very strict challenges and very strict limitations, we had to hone our craft. With the digital community, because it's so readily available and it's so relatively inexpensive until you get to the feature film level, I think there's more of an instinct to just leap in and just mess with it without learning some of the backstory and the back history. And
because you end up with pixels.
Huh?
Yeah.
And Pixels is a great example of that. That was a YouTube video that was a concept for visual. Like, if the world was pixels, what? And then they're like, okay, that's great. These guys know how to do the effect. Let's make a movie. And then you watch the movie and you're like, I'm dumber from watching it. Like, it's like, may God have mercy on the soul of the filmmakers, because, there was no reason to tell the story. Like, it didn't benefit anything. It didn't even benefit the technique of creating an effect that would inspire people to go out and do. That's what you're getting from these kind of, concept ideas, which, yes, they work well on a short format, but they're not narrative storytelling.
So I mentioned a little bit ago, we didn't really go into it as heavily. The Empire Strikes Back, the battle in the snow, the Hoth snow battle. How the hell did they do that? Modern day Avengers Endgame, how did they do that? Well, CGI. Of course it was CGI. There's no mystery. It's all one answer. And does that matter? I think it matters only in that if you have no limitations...
Okay, wait a minute. I'm sorry. Are you saying that the battle on Hoth was CGI?
No. I'm saying because...
Or are you saying that's what people assume because of...
No. What I'm saying is back then you didn't have one answer for everything. Back then you looked at things...
And figured out how to do it.
And you literally didn't know exactly how they did it because they did it so many different ways. Nowadays, where's the mystery?
Obviously, it's CGI.
Occasionally I see an image in a film and I go, wow, that's beautiful. Wow, that's spectacular. I can think of some stuff in Blade Runner 2049. There was some stuff in Dune. The ornithopters in Dune with their vibrating wings. I mean, really, really cool. And so occasionally I'm seeing a striking image, but there's no mystery anymore as to how these things were done. So am I saying that everything digital should be abandoned and we should go back to practical or optical? No, but
do you think that
there's
practical
a difference.
Should be taught?
I think film history should be studied. You and I have talked about, I have this massive collection of filmmaking books, old magazines, old media. Gil, you and I have talked about the old
Absolutely.
Cinefexes and Starlogs and Cinefantastiques and stuff. They are like these encyclopedias of old filmmaking techniques. And
I'm going to interrupt you for a second. Gil, I know that Wyatt digs his out on a regular basis. Are you referencing your old magazines pretty regularly?
Absolutely. In fact, Wyatt just introduced me to Cinefantastique, basically an online repository of those magazines. I was familiar with them, but the first thing I did was download all of them, and I've been going through them systematically. And I'm kind of like, it's a digital version of it. I have copies of Cinemagic that I bought off someone who had subscribed and had them all bound up there on my shelf. I have books from the 80s that I there's no way as a child I would be able to afford them, that are based around cinematography and visual effects that I'm forever referencing, because there's a part of me now. My interest in digital, and we haven't really gone into it too much, is to recreate the look and the feel of what was happening in a cinematic photochemical sense, but instead of pressing film together and projecting light through it and making mattes and holdouts and all the rest of it to get the image, can I create that using Adobe After Effects? Can I get the same feel? Do I generate something in the computer, or do I build a model that light's going to reflect off it naturally and be able to capture that? And I'm forever looking at the in-camera techniques that were used for so long, because I actually really believe there's going to be a resurgence of that.
And why was that kind of where you were going, saying that we should definitely be teaching film history?
Well, yeah, because you need to. Here's what I benefit from. I benefit from a massive century-long history of filmmaking, which I can then take into the digital realm and marry with the digital realm. Digital filmmakers only have digital filmmaking starting in recent history and going forward. So if you're only dependent on the digital realm, I finally answered my own question. What is the challenge of the access to all these techniques and this ability to create anything you can think of? Well, it's all great, but if it's not tempered with filmmaking history and filmmaking technique, then that's useless or ineffective. Like we talk about the overkill. We talk about thousands of shots being thrown at us and being visually overwhelmed and not being emotionally involved in the story. That's digital. That's digital and that's modern.
And then we talked about Gil and his student watching Jaws and him being, well, this is boring because he's used to that overstimulation.
Okay, someone out there is going to want to hunt me down and kill me for saying this. Imagine...
Don't do it, though.
Steven Spielberg combining his filmmaking mentality. I mean, he did it. Jurassic Park is that. But to put this in more of a context, I mean, Jurassic Park is sort of the amazing mix. But imagine Spielberg doing Jaws. Pretty much the same techniques, the same budget level, the same approach, but having digital.
It would be a completely different experience.
Well, I mean, and I could see in Spielberg's hands, maybe, he'd still use a practical shark. He'd still have a fin in the water. He'd still do the stunts that he did. He'd still have a boat out on the water. But there might be moments where, he could augment a moment where the shark leaps out of the water and crashes onto the boat and make it look more realistic. He could probably do things in the underwater scenes. Again, if you're a filmmaker who can see both sides of this and bring the best of both worlds together, but what's happening in the modern world with all digital technology is all impulse, all excess, all achievement, and no discipline, in my opinion.
Well, and you using Jaws as the example there, I mean, he had bigger ambitions, but because of practical, technical difficulties with the shark, they had to pull back on some of that, which ultimately made it a better, more suspenseful
They spent more time
film.
working on the drama, and they spent more time figuring out, it became more about the barrels as opposed to a shark.
So it's like, if we can't show the shark, how do we create something that's suspenseful? And what you end up, again, this is the beautiful thing of when you're working on a project, you can't plan everything out, right? Bruce the Shark didn't work. They were planning to show him, couldn't, so the reveal was right at the end. Now that's become the formula as well, right? But you ended up kind of questioning what is under the water that's causing all of this.
Without that temperance, you end up with Sharknado.
Right.
Well, I don't know about that.
You know what? That's a fantastic example, because with Sharknado you can do everything that you want to do.
Yeah.
Or Sharktopus, or all these different kind of things. We'll just blend and create a monster, and it becomes kind of this ludicrousy.
Digital begs the question: just because you can do something, should you do something?
In a visual effects area, absolutely. In being able to empower people to tell their story, to be able to give someone a camera who then can express themselves,
yes,
and not have to spend 6 months, doing odd jobs to get the equipment together and be able to do that. I think it's incredibly empowering. But I'll also have this caveat: when I was shooting 16mm, the film stock and the film processing would actually give me a level of credibility when I was playing my film.
Right.
I got feedback on a YouTube video who said, they literally asked me, why are your videos not laser sharp? And I was like, because my focus is not being worked out by my camera. My focus is manual, and there are times where I will shift and I will be slightly soft. And for that person, it was like, that's distracting for me. And I'm now, all right, I got to lock myself in. I've got to dial in the focus, because your experience of it is now that if it's not absolutely perfectly pristine, which is coming from the electronics in these digital cameras, I'm now distracted. So we've now got like a new expectation by a new generation.
I have to agree with that concept, though, and we've seen this when people first started using the DSLR cameras for doing films, that pulling focus on them was much more difficult because maybe they didn't have the eyepiece, or so instead of rack focusing as somebody approached the camera or moved away from the camera, we saw a lot of local independent films that, oh hey, somebody walked into the room and they're out of focus, and then they walk in and hit their mark, and when they hit the mark, they're in focus, so they didn't have to worry about the rack focus at
or
all.
let me move to get them into focus, because moving to focus was easier than focusing.
Yeah.
Which is a difference between modern digital access and technique.
Right.
Yeah.
Because with technique, you would have measured and figured out where the focus points had to be, and with the modern digital,
But I don't have a video monitor. I can't see if it's in focus or not. No, and back when they shot Casablanca, they didn't have a damn video monitor either. But boy, they knew where their focus was.
I have no idea how many times that I have in my film kit a tape measure.
Right.
And I know where my focal mark is on my camera.
Right.
And there are people who are filming, and I will throw them a tape measure, and they go, "What?
What's this for?"
Yeah. And I'm like, if it's out, and you know, I'm going to blame you because you've got the tools here to do it.
Yeah, modern day filmmakers, show me where the film plane is.
And I show them the marks even on a digital SLR camera. There are marks on the lens that are feet that you can have an idea of where the focal length is going to be. I cheat it a little bit when I'm working on my own by zooming in digitally. Most cameras will allow you to zoom in. You can zoom in physically on the lens, and then you can actually increase the zoom focus digitally, and then dialing in. So in the case of what I'm filming now, if you go back to some of our early things, it's a little softer because I was a little bit more, trying to be artistic. And, I make sure that like the hairs in my beard are crisp. And then when I pop out, I'm gold, right? I've got a mark where my chair is. I know within, as long as these two marks meet up, I'm in focus. And again, it blows me away that people are like, I have to buy a $7,000 digital SLR that's going to rack focus as I'm actually talking.
Which to me is distracting.
Yeah.
To me, that's distracting. Yeah. Because if you move a certain way, then it may...
But I have a very small Sony camera that's designed for video loggers. And one of the buttons is a depth of field button. So I could be filming myself and then press the button and everything on the background will go out of focus. So I am in focus. And I was always like, you know what? You can do that on any camera. The fact that the cameras are now making those decisions is leading back to what you were talking about before. Without having that practical filmmaking experience, you are a slave to what the camera can do. One of my pet peeves, and I hate this when it comes to digital video, is people love to saturate color. You don't do that on film. Right? Everyone's got blue lights and red lights and green lights, or they've got this green hue over all the different, images because they've graded them,
Here's the thing about learning technique and learning the science behind all this stuff and how this works and comparing and contrasting digital techniques to old analog techniques. And that is sometimes you want to do something or you're searching for a shot or you're looking for an effect and you don't know how to achieve it. The education, the study, and the looking back into history will often inform you how to get to what you want. And it doesn't even have to be literally film. Just the idea of cinematography, storyboarding, camera stabilization, staging of shots, those ideas, it's a toolbox. It's like, hey, I need a bridge to go across this river, and it needs to support very large semi-trucks carrying tons of cargo. You don't just go up and start throwing steel beams across the river. Engineers come in and they make calculations and they take measurements and they engineer the bridge. If you have the right education, you can engineer your film in much the same way.
I know you do some teaching of film concepts to students, and I do the same thing. And it always blows me away that the exposure triangle is something that's completely foreign to a class. Like, there's a triangle formula that you can plug into any camera, whether it's a film camera, a digital camera, a video camera, and it works in the same way. The results are going to be different because the technology is different in the camera. But that basic concept of how to get to structure, using your ISO, your iris, and your shutter speed.
I have a horribly difficult time teaching that concept to even sometimes older adults who have digital technology because they've only ever had the digital technology and they just know that when they hold the camera a certain way to a certain thing, it gives them a look. And then they know when they go into Photoshop and they dial up this quality and they dial up the saturation, they end up with a pretty picture. And they've gotten there in a hunt and peck and poke kind of a way, but they don't know why it looks that way and they don't know how to recreate it. Well, and that's the problem.
That's the difference. It's not an artistry, it's a luck situation. And I've actually said to my students, I'm going to hot glue the selector on the camera to manual. And you are going to have to dial in all the different settings. They're like, don't do that. And I'm like, why? They're like, because we tried on manual, we can't do it, so we just turn it to automatic. And then we just go with it. And I'm like, yeah, but you're cutting two shots together and they don't match. Yeah. And you know, and just a little hint out there for everyone. The cameras that I have, the film cameras, they didn't have light meters built in. We had to go and buy them separately. There was nothing that was automatic. The focus didn't move until you actually cranked it out. You had to go through it. There are certain things that are stuck in my head. I was actually thinking about it before. When I was at UCLA, I learned an anagram called B flat, right? Why? Batteries. Got to check the battery before you get behind the camera. Focus. Check the focus next. And you go through all these different steps. When I got a video camera, half the stuff that I did went out the window. And it became sloppy. Even so far as, hey, I've got a light. I'm going to put the light down. I don't need a sandbag because I'm shooting video. I've got to move quick. And it's like, wow. And I've seen that influence actually end up on professional shoots. But part of that comes from the fact that now you have the ability to go and grab a camera and go and make something. And if you're doing it fast and cheap and you're running and gunning, well, the experience of being able to do it safely is missed. And I remember even on my own film shoots, I remember buying sandbags from eBay and going down to the beach and finding Ziploc bags and filling them with sand, which was a cheap way of just... And I remember people going, what's the sand for? You just filled like 10 bags of sand. And I'm like, oh, we're just doing a biology experiment what lives in the sand. Like I was too embarrassed to say to them, the sandbags for a film set, for a film shoot. I just wanted to be able to have them so people were safe.
So are we kind of to a point where we should wrap it up?
I think so. I mean, there's so much stuff that we've got to talk about, but not in this episode.
Well, and I think we've done a really good job of kind of covering not maybe the specifics of the digital era from 2000 to 2021, but certainly talking a lot about the philosophy and the pitfalls and the positives and negatives. I mean, yes, you can do anything. Should you do anything? That's kind of where I leave it at is, filmmaking is still filmmaking. It doesn't matter what you have access to. I told you in one of the last couple of episodes, I'd rather see somebody make a good film with one of those Fisher-Price Pixel Vision cameras than somebody make a crap film with $250 million. Because it might be pretty and it might be flashy, but I'd much rather... I'm going to end this with one thought that came to mind earlier. It's interesting. It's fascinating. And back in the day, and the day being, let's just say, the 1970s and the 1980s, back in the day, I saw films multiple times in the theater. And when I say multiple times, let's say more than 3 times. I saw Jaws multiple times, Star Wars multiple times, Empire, Raiders, Jedi, you name it, I saw those films. Now, distribution has changed and how we watch movies has changed a lot. But what's interesting is probably nearing the year 2000, I stopped seeing movies as many times in the theaters.
And do you think that's because you could watch them at home later? You knew that you had the opportunity?
No, I don't think I was drawn back to the theater as often. It had to be a hell of a film that really impacted me. And that became fewer and farther in between. I was amused by things. I enjoyed things. But I wasn't drawn back to the theater in the same way that I was early on. There's maybe 10, maybe a dozen films that I've seen more than once in a theater. And I'm only talking twice now. I can't tell you the last film I saw 3 times in a theater after about the year 2000. Many films I saw twice. Well, a few films I saw twice. Almost every other film I just saw once. Prior to 2000, certainly prior to the 90s, I saw films 3, 4, 5, 8, 10 times in a theater.
Nerd.
Yeah.
Parallels, my friend, because I used to do the same thing. In fact, I even remember my mother saying to me, "What are you doing today?" And I was like, I'm not doing anything. She's like, "Go see that film that you really enjoy again." And I went down to the cinema and sat and watched it, like on her. So it was an amazing thing. I agree with you. I think for me, I kind of dread going to the cinema nowadays because it's not the same experience. I think the last film that I went to see in the cinema was a birthday film on my birthday, and this really sums up kind of where I go to now for my cinema enjoyment, and it was the 1980s version of Flash Gordon. Someone who had got a 70mm print and I went to a theater that was playing it. It was Total Recall and Flash Gordon. And I was like an 8-year-old kid again, watching this huge, image of Flash Gordon. And, it was amazing for me. It was one of those emotional things. I was like, you don't get to go back often and go and see something in the cinema. And I loved having that experience. That was the last thing that I saw 2 years ago. The actual experience of going to the cinema is one that leaves me hollow because it used to be such a great event.
Hey everyone, I'm Wyatt Weed from the Cinematic Perspective podcast. And as you probably know from listening to the podcast, we make movies. Well, I wanted to take a moment today and talk a little bit about some of those movies and how you can watch them at home. Four Color Eulogy was originally the brainchild of actor and filmmaker Jason Contini, who played the vampire hunter in Shadowland. Jason wrote the original story for Four Color, and then he and Nick Hearn and I wrote the screenplay. Four Color is my second feature film as a director. Four Color Eulogy is about family and dealing with life while trying to pursue your creative dreams. It's dramatic and funny, and if you're a fan of comics and movies and pop culture, you will probably enjoy this film. This is another independent project that was a joint production between Pirate Pictures and Archlight Studios. The film was made in the St. Louis area, and I'm really proud of what we were able to accomplish. You can buy or rent Four Color Eulogy at piratemediagroup.net.
I disagree with you that for me, going to the theater is still a lot of fun. There's that experience.
Yeah, there's times when it doesn't work out well, but
this past year it's been different because we're the only people in the theater, so we could just be watching it at home. But there's something about watching it on the big screen. But I do agree with you that I don't know in the past 20 years if there's been many movies that I've gone and seen more than once. But I also think that one of the differences is a dualplex or threeplex movie theater where you had a choice of 3 films to see this week versus the 20plex where you've got 15 movies that you can go see this week. That it's harder to, like if you wanted to go see a movie every week, there's so many more options within the theaters. But then also the sheer cost of going to the movies. That, the two of us just for tickets, it's going to be more than $25. What's that?
You got to mortgage your house now to go get a ticket and then go get an ice cream and a drink and some popcorn. It's not a very affordable thing, especially if you've got a family. If you're taking a whole bunch of kids. I think the last really big thing before that I saw was like Endgame. And I'll be honest with you, Endgame was not the experience I was expecting. I expected something a little bit more than what was being presented, but I was glad I finished it in the cinema. I don't know. I was talking about going to see Flash Gordon. I loved the idea that they actually had a 70mm print. It was actual film going through. Like, I was a kid again watching what I loved when I was younger. And it was just a one-night thing. And with the pandemic, we were off to the left, hiding away from everyone. And the minute it finished, I'm like, let's get out of here because we just spent like 4 hours with a whole bunch of people we don't know with masks on and all the rest of it. But there's everything that I watch now are things that come from the 70s, 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s. And I get asked all the time, it's like, can we watch something that's a little bit more modern? And I'm like, yeah, we can. But you know what? I think we went to see the latest James Bond film. And I was like, halfway through, I was bored.
I've even gotten to the point with cinemas where, the preservation of 35mm film and old film prints has been so rickety, so questionable. Here in St. Louis over the last decade, they did a series of widescreen screenings at an old theater here in the city, the Tivoli. And the Tivoli is one of the few old movie palaces that's left that still shows films. And
I know the Tivoli.
They have 35mm projectors and they have digital projectors. Well, they did one widescreen Wednesday and they showed a 35mm print of Ben-Hur.
Oh, wow.
Which was fantastic to see on the big screen. But the print was not in brilliant shape. And I remember seeing Star Wars on day 1 and it looked great. I remember Star Wars on month 6 was getting a little rough because the print's degraded. Then a few years later, they did Ben-Hur again, but they did it a digital DCP transfer file.
Right.
And I gotta say, it was still the magic of Ben-Hur, the look of the film, the grain, but it was pristine. There were no pops, there was no crackles, there was no scratches. It was brighter, it was cleaner.
Was that good, or was that...
I liked it because it's weird, because I know there's the people who are like, no, it has to be filmed, projected on 35 millimeter. And I respect that. But if we're not going to have, in the 1970s, I think the projectors would have been better. The prints would have been better. If all that's left is this one scrapped together, repaired 35 millimeter print of this thing, and I can see a pristine digital transfer
From that print.
then I'm on the fence sometimes, because I got really burned because there was a film from England that I really wanted to see called Sunshine. It was a Danny Boyle science fiction film about this trip to the sun to fix the sun, and it's kind of a depressing bummer of a movie, but it's cool, and it's Danny Boyle, and I support Danny Boyle, and I was really looking forward to it. Well, it was kind of a roadshow thing where they were touring the print around the country, and it would go regionally, and I don't know, they had like 150 prints in the United States, and they were just kind of going wherever they were going. It came locally, and I was like, Gayle, I want to see this movie. And unfortunately, what it had the effect of was the print was in such crap condition, with so much scratching and dirt and shit on it, that I kind of thought to myself, okay, that's the last time I'm going to see a 35 millimeter film print where I can't
See it opening night?
secure what it is. And after that, I have to admit that if somebody said to me, oh, showing Ben-Hur, 35 millimeter film print, digital 4K version, I'd go with the 4K version, because I know there's an archival interest to this over here, but yeah, I was so burned, and I have to admit that,
I'm going to quote Jerry Lewis here, because Jerry Lewis was an incredible filmmaker in his own right, and in fact, he created the video tap and created a lot of the techniques that are used today. A lot of in-camera jokes. I mean, he really understood.
right.
If you look at some of his films, the humor that comes from the framing and what's going on in the frame and all the rest of it. He did a whole bunch of lectures at no, it wasn't UCLA, it was the other one.
USC?
USC. He did a whole bunch of lectures at USC, and someone had written them down and they published them as books. And he said, if you love film, there'll be a point where you will eat the film. And I remember someone actually was chewing on film emulsion, and I said, what are you eating? He goes, well, Jerry Lewis, he said, if you really love film, you'll eat the film. And I'm like, yeah, but Jerry Lewis also doesn't mean for you to get cancer, because there's a whole lot of chemicals on that plastic thing, and maybe don't take it so literally. But I do understand the point he was trying to make. I enjoy seeing the scratches. I remember seeing I
don't mind to a point.
a 35mm print of Dune, which was the 84 version, and the battle at the end with the Fremen against the Emperor was all cut out because it had been damaged, and everyone was like, boo, like we were all waiting for this whole thing. They were all like, jeering in the theater for this science fiction marathon. But then it picked up from the actual end of it. And while it was a little disheartening, it didn't destroy that experience. And I kind of like that moment, and that screening for me is something unique, because I got to see it as a actual physical film print. And I do like seeing kind of my feeling when I see dirt on the film print is, hey guys, I'm happy to come for a day and just clean your print up for you. I know how to do that.
There's something to it to a certain point. But I remember we saw a screening of my friends and I out in LA. We saw a screening, a film print, like a midnight screening of Mad Max 2, which here is The Road Warrior.
Oh yeah.
And there was something wrong, and I don't know if it was the first reel or if it was the second reel. There was a changeover at one point, and the sound got very weird, and things didn't look right. And they had flipped the film.
Oh, in the projector. Yeah.
So they put it together wrong. And the film stopped, and the guy came out, and even the focus changed because the emulsion would have changed ever so slightly.
Sure. Yeah,
so
absolutely.
He came out and he said to everybody, look, here's what happened. We apologize. And I think they gave us all passes to come back again. But they said, we're going to take this out. We're going to fix it. and we're going to re-show it. He said, it's going to take, I think it took like 20 minutes for them to do it.
Sure.
And we all sat there and we all waited. And then the film started up again. So, there's that love-hate thing of, I love the fact that the film was such a physical thing that it could literally be reversed incorrectly and taped together wrong. But by the same token, it's the 35 millimeter print of Ben-Hur left me wanting because it was so dark, it was so scratchy, it was the audio was so distorted. So yeah, I hate to be the.
I will travel to go and see a 70mm print of some of the films that I loved. I mean, you're talking about The Road Warrior, but when I got to see that 70mm print at the Egyptian, like my experience of that film has never been the same.
I will travel to see a 70mm print of Lawrence of Arabia because I haven't seen it in 70mm on a big screen for real. And I would like to have that experience once before I die. I would go several hours to go see a 70mm.
I see a GoFundMe campaign.
Okay, there you go. And on that note,
let's get Gil and Wyatt to go and see a Lawrence of Arabia 70mm print together, and we'll do a podcast from the theater.
On that note, hey, I think that we should find out from our viewers, listeners, what their experiences with digital versus analog has been. So you guys, if there's anything that you want to add to this conversation, be sure to drop us a note either on Facebook or here on YouTube or wherever it is that you're listening or watching this podcast, because we kind of want to know what your experiences are. And make sure you like us and subscribe to all of the places that we are, and follow us on all the social media-ness.
Here's my analog experience for the day. I have a piece of paper.
We all have our pieces of paper.
with a pencil. Analog that, biatches. All right.
I got a fountain pen. Does that make me even older school?
Ooh, yeah.
Look at this. I got a fountain pen.
Look at that.
Like, you don't get more analog than that.
All right, guys. So we will see you next time. Later.
We'll catch you then.